Welcome everyone to our presentation on Wikidata and Americanization. My name is Piotr Konieczny and I am joined here by
Włodzimierz Lewaniewski.
And we are going to be again telling you a really, what I hope is a fun and interesting story about the practical use of Wikidata and how we can use it to do real research that wasn't previously possible. So let's get started. All right. So Americanization is something I believe everybody is vaguely familiar with. It's one of those common buzzwords like globalization and so on. And we have chosen it for our research because it is, again, a relatively well-known topic. Even through English Wikipedia page about Americanization is just like, start or C-class, not particularly impressive. Have to work on that at some point. But it is a topic which is, again, not particularly well quantified. There are a lot of articles in social sciences about it, but they don't really explain the numbers. And this is, of course, related to various biases on Wikipedia. We all know our project is suffering from many biases. The gender bias is the one that's most famous, but there are others. So Wikipedians tend to focus too much on things that we like, pop culture, or some esoteric things. Big topics are not all very well covered. Well, we all know that the project has many problems. And one of those problems, if we assume it's a problem, is that, again, there is bias towards, again, things we know with regards to, again, Americanization, because people know about the United States, people care about the United States. A lot of the Wikipedians are from United States, and so we assume that this is going to be something we can actually show, we can measure, and we can also use it as a proxy to talk about Americanization in the big world. Because, again, while there are quite a few academic books, not to mention articles about Americanization, there is really no quantification. Like, if you want to say, is Poland more Americanized than Italy? We don't know. Well, now maybe we know because of our research, but until our research, nobody ever tried to actually quantify this and compare this. So this is a problem that our research is trying to address. Now, we can measure this in various ways. Again, Americanization is a complex concept. We can talk about culture, we can talk about language, we can talk about social media, and so on and so on. And here, of course, we are at Wikimania. We are talking about Wikipedia articles and Wikidata entries. And briefly, we can say, well, let's see how many articles, but also other digital objects like references and so on that we use in our projects are related to United States. And through this, we can actually try to measure which, for example, Wikipedia is more Americanized. Like, is, for example, Polish Wikipedia more Americanized than Italian or Korean and so on? Well, this is actually something we can measure because, this is data. Unlike, again, previous studies which were talking about various aspects of culture and so on. Culture is beautiful, but, culture is not very easy to quantify. And this is what we can do with Wikidata. We can actually quantify culture. We can quantify previously unmeasurable concept. And this is really, I think, one of the coolest things we are trying to mention and promote because, again, there in social sciences, I am a social scientist myself, there is a lot of theoretical concepts. We talk about globalization, we talked about inequality. A lot of this stuff is very hard to quantify. If you actually try to look for data that allows you to compare various countries and so on, this stuff often doesn't exist. It was shocking me when I learned about this as a student. It still shocks me how little of our big concept is actually quantifiable. Again, globalization, like there are some indices of that, but they are not very good, mostly focusing on economics and so on. And here we can actually see that we can use Wikipedia, Wikidata and so on to quantify cultural things. And again, I personally think it's super cool, and I hope you guys will agree that at least this has some potential for improving our knowledge. All right, so let's take a look at something. Sorry, I managed to, in my excitement, run over the local lighting system. All right, so again, we are asking our questions, which Wikipedians have more American content? Now, what actually this can tell us? again, this can allow us to measure not only, of course, Americanization, we can measure later using the same metrics other things like influence of, let's say, Western culture in general, or the spread of Korean culture or African culture and so on. We can actually see patterns in cultural dominance, shifting, retreating, and so on. This is not what we are doing yet, but our model allows for, again, measuring culture on that level. Now, how did we actually create this model? This is something Wodek will tell you about.
Okay, so we started to explore which methods we can use to find those articles which are related to American culture, United States, and so on. There are different possibilities how to do that. One of the, we can say, simplest way of thinking is category structure on Wikipedia. And second approach, which we try using Wikidata statements, so Wikidata items which are semantically connected with Wikipedia articles in different languages. If we go to a category structure, we can observe that there is a lot of categories, over 10 million over the different languages. And the problem of those categories is that there is no stable construction, there is no hierarchy of categories, and they are changed over time. So it's difficult to find categories, all categories that are related to America, American culture, United States. So we go to second approach, which use Wikidata items, as I said before. And this is semantic database, so we can find a lot of information that cannot be directly founded by Wikipedia. So thanks to semantic structure, Wikidata can create new knowledge, and we can also find items in more specific way. So we explore around 100 million Wikidata items to find, we're using different approach to find America related to American culture and United States. For example, what we can use in Wikidata items, there are different statements related to country, alignment to country, for example, which city is placed in what country, place of birth if it's person, country of citizenship, and so on. Here you have examples. Boston is an item in Wikidata with identify Q100, and we can find their statement that Boston is placed in country United States. Steve Jobs, we can also find information about his, for example, place of birth or citizenship. So we explore such items to find related Wikipedia articles in considered language versions of Wikipedia. In this study, we took 58 languages. Of course, we can expand this research to other languages, but there is some problems with and limitation which we will discuss later.
All right, so I will resume. With regards to the theory, we don't really have time here to talk about, let's say, the sociological and cultural theories underpinning our research, but I just put on a few previous studies. Michael Ribe-Lanyadoo, 2008, did some pioneering research on cultural studies and Wikipedia. I have some papers of relevance as well. And for the big theoretical background, we rely on Hecht, Hofstede, Ingerhals, Wetzel, which again, we do not have time to explain what those theories generally imply because we are limited on time, but you can of course check them on Wikipedia if you are more curious, or read our paper, which is already published in a journal. or the first of the several series we have planned. Now, with regards to how we actually do this, I will talk a bit more because a bit of meat in the data is useful. So we have designed several parameters. We call them here in those abbreviations like PP, CRV, and so on. We have 4 of them in the initial analysis. They are actually showing us, the first two, the PP, CRV, and the VPC, are kind of telling us, is our data reliable, by looking at the percentage of people in a primary country reading Wikipedia in a given language, which can be very high or very low. For example, a lot of people, almost everybody in Poland reads Polish Wikipedia, and very few people outside Poland actually read Polish Wikipedia because that's language dependent. For some other countries, like English or Arabic, the numbers are quite different because people from many countries go there. This is also related to our limitations. I'll talk about them in a moment. Second VPC parameter is related to the other side of this coin, percentage of views from the primary country directed to that Wikipedia. Because you can have, again, Wikipedias which are read by people from other countries, and this is again skewing the data, because if you want to ask, are people in a given country interested in this, but let's say Americanization, well, to what degree we are actually measuring this, right? If we take, for example, let's say Russian Wikipedia is one of those semi-international Wikipedias. People read it from Ukraine, from Belarus, from a lot of Central Republics, and so on. Just like English Wikipedia is international, and people from all around the world read it as well. So we cannot say that some Wikipedias represent only a particular country. Again, there are easy cases like Poland, Korea, and some others, and cases which are much more problematic like Arabic and so on. Now, our second set of parameters, the US RAS and US RAVC, is talking about the American data. In other words, what is the percentage of American-themed articles in a given Wikipedia, and how popular they are. This is the RAVC. In other words, are people actually reading this? Because as we will see from our data, we will have Wikipedias which have a lot of American articles, which people are not really reading them much. And on the contrary, we also find there are Wikipedias where people want to read about American topics, but they don't have that much American articles. So actually, you can use our model to even figure out if there is some Wikipedias need or want more coverage of particular topics, and you don't even have to limit this to things like American culture or Korean culture. Presumably, you could use the same model to talk about entertainment, sports, military, or something else. We are going to be exploring this maybe in future Wikimanias. Now, a bit about limitations, because it's something that we should mention. Briefly put, Wikipedias not always cover particular countries. That's why we actually limited our study to about 58 Wikipedias, which are relatively large and somewhat representative of particular countries. Out of those, we say that 47 meet our two of our several reliability criteria, primarily having more than 40,000 articles, and at least 50% of the expected population uses that Wikipedia, and similarly, it has 50% of views from that particular country. So we're trying to aim for something that's not very small, and it's roughly used by at least half the people of a given country and culture. Because if we try to go with like 90%, we'd end up with like 5 Wikipedias, because again, we are very much international project. As a reminder, we don't have, let's say, Indian Wikipedia. There's no Indian language. Arabic Wikipedia spans half, almost like half the world if you go by geographic things. Spanish and Portuguese Wikipedia actually represent 90% of Latin America, because that's pretty much where the language is mostly spoken if you go by number of people who are alive. English Wikipedia is kind of international. So there is a lot of similar small problems, and if you read our paper, we have like 1.5 pages discussing this in more detail. But since we are slowly running out of time, I'm going to quickly talk about the cool stuff, which is the results. So what did we find out? Well, we found out that indeed we can measure the stuff, and there are some interesting things. We can take a look. Here we have a bubble chart. You can explore it in more detail on Wodek's website, which is linked below. And this is showing us, for example, here we have in the top right corner, you can see EN. This is the big bubble for the English Wikipedia, which kind of tells us what we expected. Also tells us that our research is actually making some sense. In other words, English language Wikipedia is the one which both has the most articles about American topics, and they are the most popular. And this is actually good, because if we didn't find it, it would mean our data is probably borked and something else. We are just not making any sense. Now, on the other hand, you can see again that there are Wikipedians in which, let's say, in which American articles are popular, but they are not read as much, and some where the reverse is true. Some Wikipedians, again, similar to English, and we call those actually the ones with high Americanization. Italy, by the way, emerges as the most Americanized Wikipedia in the world, except English one. Why? We don't really have time to discuss it. It's because we are talking mostly about the data, but this is something that I will also come back in the later slides. And if you are curious about other ones, here we have Arabic, for example, Spanish and Portuguese almost seem at the same level as Italian, and so on and so on. Unfortunately, again, we just have about 10 minutes remaining, so I cannot go over every of the 50 countries, but I will tell you a bit more about some details. Here we can see the same data, but in the form of the table. The first, again, two columns talk about, let's say, the reliability. So, for example, the low number 7% for Chinese Wikipedia is a reminder that actually Wikipedia is blocked in China. So actually have very few people we can from China that are actually reading that Wikipedia. It's mostly actually people from Hong Kong and Taiwan. Also VPN data also skews that particular data set, so we cannot be fully even sure about this. For the English one, again, it has the highest number. The 5 top numbers in each row are bolded. So we can see, for example, that as far as the views, in other words, people being interested in American topics, we have English, and then Italian, followed by French, Spanish, and German. Those are the Wikipedias where people seem to care about American topics the most. But with regards to how many, or the percentage of articles about America, that's a bit different. Again, English is still number 1. But you can see, for example, Arabic Wikipedia, even though American topics are not as popular there, still has quite a lot of articles about America, maybe botting and so on. You can see this again in some other cases as well. Again, don't really have time to go into every single country. We do have a few pages of discussions about this in our paper, but I still have a few things to cover. We also have, we are developing additional supplementary data based on the number of references, American references, which are the most popular. For example, here, if I zoom to this, you can see the list of some most popular American sources of references. That includes the New York Times, also CIA.gov. For those who are like, what the hell? This is because CIA has a world factbook of information, which used to be cited a lot for like demographical data, country size, population, and all of that. So this is not the evidence that American government is manipulating Wikipedia. It's just that for some reason, CIA has a good, nice, like mini encyclopedia that people used to use a lot in the early days of Wikipedia. Now, here I'm going to pass the mic to Wodek, who will tell you a bit about the cool heat maps he developed.
Generally, to measure importance of sources in Wikipedia, in that case, American sources in Wikipedia, we plan to use different models. One of the simplest way to find out if the American sources are important in different languages is to count how frequent they are in references. But we also wanted to, as Piotr mentioned before, there is a question if this articles was produced by bots and maybe it's not shows real interest of Wikipedia readers in this language. So we wanted to use more complicated model to measure importance of American sources. It's, as an example, peer model and AR model are also includes data about popularity of articles, and R model is about measuring also authors' interest for these articles. So these heat maps in general shows the positions in rankings of selected sources. If you want, I can zoom. For F model, for example, here we have, okay, if you want to have more details, you can go to this website, special for Wikimania, interactive heat map. So you can see here how high is position of separate source in separate language version. So you see that depending on language version, the same source can have different position. So it means different also importance. But if you compare these results in different models, we also can observe different results, different trends, and so on. So we planned to expand this research and publish, I think, several papers about that. It's a big topic, interesting topic, a lot of problems, but we also invite other researchers to join maybe this interesting research.
Well, our data is available online, and we hope this will inspire more scholars from various fields to look into how we can use Wikidata again to quantify previously that unmeasurable concept like Americanization. And there's plenty of those, Westernization, influence of Chinese culture, and so on and so on. Now, we are slowly running out of time, so I'm just going to quickly go over a few more findings and then open the room for questions. Here, the last few slides talk about some of the research related to specific countries. Roughly, we find, for example, that the so-called developed countries, however we define them, are more Americanized than the developing countries, or at least the Wikipedias representing developed countries have both more articles and percentage-wise and more views of American topics than not. So this is one interesting conclusion. Now, some other things, again, as I mentioned, English Wikipedia, the most Americanized. Outliers, Haitian and Urdu Wikipedia, we just treat them as outliers because probably botting and other things. We don't think they're actually representing cultural phenomena rather than bad data. We next find that the next most actually Americanized region is both Europe and Latin America. In particular, Latin America seems to have a lot of interest in American topics. We have some specific numbers here, like 16% popularity, 11% article count of Spanish and Portuguese Wikipedias are about American topics. For Europe, we divided them into specific groups like Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, and the numbers here are a bit lower, as you can see, at the average about like a bit below 10%. So again, our research, for example, suggests that Latin America is more Americanized, more interested in American topics and covers them more than any other place in the world. And if you want to ask why, well, this is for cultural scientists to discuss, because we honestly are not, we have some hypotheses in our paper, but we are not fully sure. We are not experts on Latin American culture, and assuming our data is correct, and we think it is, because the numbers, those are large Wikipedias with many views from that region, so they do seem to represent real phenomena and not some bad data. That said, again, check our limitation sections in the paper, because, well, we are dealing with quite complex data. I mentioned Italy as the place which is very, let's say, Americanized. On the other hand, Norway seems to be the least Americanized country. For some reason, Norway Wikipedia has the least, with regards to Europe, has the least topics about America and the least views. There are, well, with regards to Western, actually, I should mention countries. Belarus is the least Americanized in Europe. Also, the data for Belarus on the wiki is iffy. For those who know the problems, well, it's not perhaps the most reliable finding. Ukraine, for example, has middling number. Poland is a bit higher. But unfortunately, I think we don't really have time to go again through all those countries. So I will just mention again that Western countries seem to be more Americanized than non-Western. With regard to the rest of the world, well, we know less, because again, Europe has a lot of different Wikipedias, and if you look at, again, Africa or Asia, there are much fewer, not to mention, again, the problem with the Latin America. Asian cluster reports values of about 5% popularity and 6 article count, Islamic 4 and 9, so a bit lower than Europe and definitely lower than Latin America. If you want details on, again, Islamic Wikipedia and so on, they are on the slides, but we really want to have at least 1 or 2 questions, and I'm sure you guys may want to ask something. What I will say is, again, our data, for example, for India is not very good because Indian Wikipedia doesn't exist. We have Hindi as a proxy, but it's a low actually popularity Wikipedia overall compared, so we don't know much about India. Hebrew Wikipedia representing Israel seems to be on the same level as Western Europe, highly interested in American topics. Chinese Wikipedia also seems to be relatively interested in American topics. To what degree this represents mainland China, we are not really sure, because data on that is, again, very limited. So this is pretty much what we have found out. There is, again, pretty much, we have many questions. We are trying to understand our data, and we will input from both more cultural scientists and more wiki experts. And now we are pretty much going to pass this to you for the last minute or so of our Q&A time. What would you like to ask us?
I'm just going to nip in with one or two questions from the online folks, if that's okay. First one is, do we have neutral models that would determine what the expected value of these various measures would be in an ideal neutral encyclopedia?
I think briefly would say...
Microphone, sorry.
I think the expected models would represent some kind of parity between countries, and we would have to discuss what it does mean to have a parity and neutrality in this aspect. Like, should we be representing, for example, numbers of population? Like, should we have equal number of articles based on current population? What about history? So in other words, we do not, because it's very difficult to talk about neutrality when we talk about like entire world throughout the entire history. It's kind of like saying, well, it's much more complex than with gender, which would be roughly 50%, but here, well, much more difficult to develop. But a good idea. So anybody, whoever asks these questions, email us and we'll be happy to talk about it. It's cool.
So my question is, how are you able to quantify pages that a lot of people visit, but the page wasn't created, so therefore people hit a red link, so it doesn't show up?
Yes, okay, it's a problem from one hand, but from another hand, we can find those page views in a statistic data set. Even if page do not exist, the page views mechanism collect this data. Of course, if article doesn't exist, it will collect much less potential page views than people who want to enter to this page, to this red link, and there is no page. So, of course, this is one of the limitations of our study. There are different rules in Wikipedias that say that you must prepare perfect article to be published. So maybe someone wanted to place some short information about something related to America, but he or she cannot because of rules in this local Wikipedia language.
I will also add that, as we mentioned, limitations, the smaller the Wikipedia we analyze, the less complete it is, the less data we have. So this model has like a lot of future potential. As Wikipedia grows, our data will be better and better because it will be more complete. Right now, we can think of this preliminary study, which kind of shows the feasibility of this model, but let's wait 20 more years for really good data.
How do you deal with automatic translate tools?
We controlled for the number of bots active, and I would say this is like this is what we do at this point. So Wikipedians which have a lot of bots are given like less ways in our research.
I can also add something because we use two measures. More than two, but one of them is found how much articles related to all articles, how much articles about America are in this language. And second measure is measure how popular are articles, those articles. So even if bots create articles, but a very low number visit these articles, we also will see on the second measure that it's not so popular in this language, American topics not so, even if the number is big.
And we're going to have to wrap it up there, I'm afraid, folks. Okay, so we've got 1 minute for the end of the session. So if you need to go to a different session, feel free to leave. The next session will be
Thank you very much.
starting shortly. Thank you very much to our speakers.